We're live and hopefully visible.
Hi, all. We're not having great connectivity, but welcome, Generational Change. It's Thursday night.
It is
Thursday night, Generational Change. I'm Jen.
I'm Peter, and we are trying to solve the climate crisis.
And we can't even solve our own internet connection crisis. So I don't know how,
Well, hopefully we don't have to dig for more lithium or God knows what else that's hurting the planet. Blurry, but there. Thank you, Olivera.
Yeah, really we have technical difficulties.
Yeah, but we're working on it. Hey, Blue. Yeah, so of course tonight's an interesting evening. We've got a number of different topics to talk about, but where we do want to start, which I think is very important, is we have a new segment, a new thing that we are doing.
But it really isn't new. It just we haven't done it by itself, really. We've done it as that's what we call guests. Like, I guess, because I always use that word.
That's true. That's true. Well, actually, Aarika Rhodes is probably going to be here in a couple of minutes. So we'll just tell you, obviously, what has happened with the Texas abortion law, huge deal. Of course, it looks like it has a stay of execution, would probably be the best way to put it. But we all know that that could get hung up for, I don't know, how long could it get hung up for with legal eagles just, kind of going back and forth about, is it, is there a legal standing to have the law,
I don't even know what case you're like. I'm not sure what you're even talking about.
Well, we're talking about Judge Altman in Texas.
It's Pittman.
Pittman.
And
I think it's Altman.
I don't know, but you should stop that because Altman is a judge here that was appointed by Trump. And I assure you would not have ruled in this direction.
He's a tremendous person.
You're making you're conflating two things. So it's Judge Pittman. And so this week, instead of having a bootlicker, we're doing an official change maker. So we are giving props to, do you want to share it? Do you want to pull it up?
Timing wise, I think we should probably hold just because we're very close to the line right now. But we do want to just mention that this is obviously a very important topic that we do want to cover because, again, the Department of Justice did say that they were going to file a lawsuit in relation to this bill that was passed. And I still think that the GOP bit off more than they can chew with this. I just think that this is, again, it's a wedge issue.
It's like what Bo says. It's like the dog that catches the car.
Now what do you do?
Exactly. Like, now what are you going to do with that? It's just the truth is that law is just so impractical from a logistical standpoint of enforcement.
And it's archaic.
That it's, well, yes, but even just in how it would even work, it's just not something that's very feasible. So, but I am thankful for Judge Pittman saying, yeah, no, we're not going to be enforcing this law right now.
No, it's definitely one of those situations that I think is going to get played out quite a bit. But again, political cycles move very quickly and people are not necessarily talking about it as much as they were, let's say, a week ago. But that could always change. And the fact that this has been shelved temporarily is obviously a big deal. We'll see just how far they want to fight it.
What I don't understand is why you're getting into this, but you don't want to pull up the thing and then now you're still talking about this, and then you're going to want to talk about it again and pull up the graphics. So
all right, fine. We'll talk about it.
I don't understand you. What's your plan here?
Jen likes to rag on me a lot. If you guys haven't noticed,
no, but look, I made the nice graphic.
Yeah, you do. There's your change maker of the week.
Thank you, change maker of the week. So, although there's so many bootlickers to choose from, we decided this week to go in a positive direction.
Well, this is a very positive development, and again, like I said. Look, when it comes to the issue of abortion, it's a women's health issue. I really wish people would recognize that. I don't care what your, religious beliefs are, or, where you think you have a place of standing when it comes to what a woman has the right or not right to do with their body. And I don't want to hear your BS about, what about the life of the child and this and that and the other thing. If we had a country that actually gave a damn about children and the sanctity of making sure they were, growing up in an environment, everyone could grow up in an environment that's stable and nurturing and can actually lead to, positive life growth and all that. That would be one thing, but we don't have that. And so this idea that we're going to tell you what you should and shouldn't do, I just think is ridiculous. And, I really wish libertarians would speak up a lot louder about this because they all universally, for the most part, agree that this is not is not right. And
it's not good.
It is not their business to be telling people.
But I would like to point out that he is a district judge in the Western District of Texas, which I used to clerk for a judge in the Western District of Texas in San Antonio. So I do know that it's a very good district. And this goes toward what we talk about what I have said many times, the difference between state judges and federal judges, it's really ginormous. It's a very big difference. And I've worked in both places, and the level of professionalism, decorum, and non-political jurist is federal. And I know people think that now they're using it in such a political manner, and they are, and the Supreme Court is not in a good way right now. But I have met infinitely better federal judges than state judges. Just saying.
And why do you think that is?
Well, first of all, you have to have a certain amount of credentials and you have to be appointed. But state judges, it's whoever has the biggest signs and has the money to win an election. So it could be, people and people go and vote. They just vote for the name. They vote. Oh, I saw his sign. All right. Yeah. Oh, she looks nice. Yeah. Because people elect judges. So that's why. So state judges are elected by, they don't have to have any credentials. They don't have to be anything. Not that credentials necessarily are the be all end all.
Now, I think you're one of the mind that actually believes that judges should be appointed and not voted in.
I do.
Okay.
I do. I do think judges should be appointed and not. I think that having elected judges is a travesty. It's a joke. Regular, ordinary people have no clue what they're voting for when they're voting for judges. Of course, they don't really with anything, but specifically with judges, it's very, you're making life and death decisions for people based on how big and colorful someone's campaign sign is. It's not a good look.
And as you have pointed out repeatedly, there is also this commonality when it comes to voting for something that you're not sure of to always vote yes.
Well, right. So,
No.
which also happens when people ask when there's elections, should we retain this judge? Then everyone goes, sure. They don't know what this judge has done. So I just think, look, we have elected officials in the executive branch, in the legislative branch. I really think that the judiciary branch ought not have But I also support the idea of term limits, and even as much as term limits for the Supreme Court. They have to be at least longer than 2 presidential terms. Maybe you do a term for them would be like 12 years or something. I don't know, but I have no problem with the idea of limits on that as well.
Well, and again, like you said, there's the whole concept of rubber stamping. It's like, well, if you're going to rubber stamp judges, you put them on the ballot. Most people don't know what they're about. And odds are, especially for incumbent judges, it can become a problem. And so, trying to change that is not easy. But again, in this case, Judge Pittman has clearly decided to put himself out there. I have no doubt that he's probably going to get challenged in his next election pretty hard.
Look, I mean, it's the problem is he's not elected.
He's appointed.
He's appointed. He's in the Western District of Texas. So he has 0 F's to give about what the people of the area think of him. But he is in Austin. I would like to point that out. So that's
the blue oasis in the big red.
Yeah. So I mean, I would say
the
that
big red Lone Star.
Yeah.
But nevertheless, like I said, I'm not. Yeah, and I think what we're going to do. It appears that our candidate Aarika Rhodes is either running late or may have had something come up, and our 2 primary guests for this evening
are here.
And so
I think we're going to start.
Yes,
we're going to start. And if Aarika comes, just tell her to come, just message her to come at the end, and we're just going to get into it.
Yes.
Did you bring your book with you?
My book is actually not my. Well, I have.
He read this book.
Yes, and of course
we don't both read everything. We're going to put that out there. We alternate. So like he reads some of the books, I read some of the books, which is better than me reading half and him reading half. That wouldn't work very well. So he did read this, and so you will be able to have
a legitimate conversation.
I think that I'll be able to keep up. I mean, I think that this is written for regular people, so it can't be like real rocket science.
It's very fact intensive, which is important, but it also really gets to the to the crux of what we're dealing with here, and that is the fact that we live in a planet where the 3. Yeah, I would say, well, the 3, and not the 3 most populous countries, but certainly the ones that utilize the most amount of energy on the planet are the ones that are causing the largest carbon footprint between us, India, and China. And so, we have to have solutions that can not just sustain the planet, but be long-term as well. There's a lot to cover.
Yeah. I'm of the thought, like with a lot of this stuff, like you say, it's very fact intensive. And I personally am just like this. Look, that's why there's experts who know this stuff. I don't need to know. I can't know everything. Like I kind of just look at it. All right, listen, you say what needs to be done and we'll just go get that done. Like I can't, everybody cannot be an expert on everything. And I've stopped trying. I do not have enough brain cells left, honestly, to be dedicating to everything. So I just let experts be experts and just say, okay, that sounds good. Let's do that. That's
Yeah,
that's how I work.
Yeah, the co-authors of the book, The Decarbonization Imperative, which is about to come out. It is a topic that we talk about constantly on the show, the importance of the environment. We are at ground zero for environmental catastrophes here in South Florida, sea level rise, red tide, blue-green algae.
See, we know all those problems, right?
Yes.
But we need to know how that's going to affect the global economy.
Oh, well.
And that's
maybe that's
really
why Silicon Valley's trying to relocate to South Florida. Maybe they're going to solve it.
I think that's really what we need to look at. It's like you can look at how to fix environmental problems, but you also have to be simultaneously addressing transitioning the entire economy. So
bingo.
That's the crux of this. So
without further ado, Michael Lenox and Becky Duff, welcome to Generational Change.
Thank you for having us.
Great to be here.
Absolutely.
It's a pleasure. And so, as you can imagine.
Oh, we should also say, I know you guys are University of Virginia, correct? We didn't do like any sort of long introduction, but we will promote the book and stuff. But you are at the University of Virginia, correct? I am right?
That is correct.
Okay. So if you would just do like a brief introduction of like how what you do, what your background is at the university, what you teach, and what the mission of this book was.
So I'll start. Once again, Mike Lenox. I'm a faculty member at the Darden School of Business, trained as an economist, but very interested in how technologies evolve, how industries are disrupted. And obviously in the book, we're tackling climate change, and in particular, how we get more clean technologies into the economy.
Yes. And it's you prefer Becky or Rebecca?
Becky is fine. I always say that you need to get to know me a little bit better to call me Becky, but we'll just start with Becky.
And we only said that because that's what's on your screen. Like on our promotion, I used Rebecca. I was not presumptuous, but you had it on your screen.
It's very confusing. I apologize for that, but
no, it's all good. So you guys work together.
Yep. Yes. So I actually work at the Batten Institute, which is a center at the Darden School of Business. And I'm a researcher there. And I actually came to Darden with quite a bit of experience consulting EPA on some energy efficiency programs. So I actually came to this work with a little bit of knowledge of some of the sectors that we talk about in the book. But certainly it was a learning experience for me as well as I did research in these other industry sectors.
Yeah, I'm curious about that. Like, what was that research process? Like, how did you do that? Like, how long did it really take you to put together the information for this book? Because I imagine it was not, oh, let's write a book, and then like a couple weeks later, you just write a book, right? So,
no,
what was the research process?
Yeah, so it actually started through an initiative that we launched at the School of Business, and it called the Business Innovation and Climate Change Initiative. And as part of that initiative, and as part of kind of this need to educate people around decarbonization and technology disruption, the role of technology disruption in decarbonization, we wanted to look at each of the sectors. And so we wanted to look at the clean technologies that had the best potential to disrupt those sectors, and also look at some of the policy actions as well. And to do that, we did focus on releasing individual reports first. So the first 3 years of that initiative was doing the research on each one of those sectors. And about every 6 months, we would release a specific sector report. So, I mean, it was intense research for 6 months straight. I think the interesting thing is at the end of all of it, Mike and I looked at each other and we were like, we need to put this in a book. I mean, instead of doing these individual reports, and, you look out there at the other books that are available, and they're very specific to specific industries, right? And so what we hadn't seen yet is somebody that could take all of these sectors, put them together, and kind of tell that story of just how much work has to be done. And honestly, when we started writing the book, I looked at the chapters that I wrote early on, and 3 years later, we're already having to update that information because for some of these industries, the change is happening at a rapid pace.
So and again, like I know you heard in the intro, Peter read this, I read the last book that we did, but if you would just talk about the different sectors that you did focus on in this research.
Yeah, I think, one of our hopes with this book is that I think climate change can be so overwhelming to people that if you break it down into its constituent parts, you can at least start to get your hands around the problem. So we focus on scope 1 emissions, so where emissions actually occur rather than up and down the supply chain, for example. And if you do that, there are basically a handful of very large sectors that are the critical ones here. So first and foremost, everyone knows electrical generation. So the use of coal and natural gas predominantly to produce electricity is a major emitter, about a quarter of global emissions. Transportation is another big one of the largest in the United States. It's actually not too large globally. It's about 15% or so of global emissions come from automobiles and other forms of transportation. And then there's a couple other sectors that probably don't receive as much attention. So one we talk about are industrials. So this is all different types of manufacturing and the like. But there's a few particular ones that stand out. Steel production, cement, and petrochemicals are three that really generate a lot of emissions, greenhouse gases themselves. The last two are buildings, our built environment. So we use, for example, natural gas for heating and for cooking purposes and the like. That's actually a smaller percent globally. It's about 6%. And then last but not least, the one that I think Becky and I agree that we're kind of most fearful on is agriculture. So agriculture.
We were going to say, I'm picturing cows out the yin yang, but yeah.
And it's funny because, people talk about it and it's out there, but it truly is a significant generator of greenhouse gases that if we're going to get to a decarbonized economy, we're going to need to address.
Yeah.
Reading your book, again, agriculture, transportation, energy, construction, industrial.
I just want to say quickly, is there like another book coming for military industrial complex? Or is that more within manufacturing? That's like within.
Well, Charlottesville is not too far.
I'm just saying, I think military and agriculture, to me. But okay, sorry, go on.
I think, if you want to cover the military-industrial complex, that covers transportation, construction, energy, even agriculture to a degree. So it basically is a spectrum across the board. My thought is, what is going to be. And Michael, as you alluded to in the book, there isn't a silver bullet to solving pretty much any of these problems. But, we do have to figure out, what are the most sensible solutions that come to mind that I think a lot of people can get behind. The easy one, as you tracked, of course, is transportation. A lot of people can get behind the idea of driving a hybrid car, an electric car. I happen to drive one. You also drive one. But the issue that I don't think it's talked about enough, which I really think would benefit this country exponentially, of course, is high-speed rail. I really do think that is something, especially when you talk about the fact that we are so far behind technologically when it comes to China. That is one of the things that we could do to catch up. And there is so much of an opportunity there to make it so. But as you guys know, and we talk about politics on this podcast, we know that probably the biggest impediment to getting where we need to go is all of the bureaucratic red tape on Capitol Hill, specifically in these sectors that lobby, Congress as hard as they do. So, corporate special interest money is the main topic we talk about here. But I am curious as to your guys' thoughts, starting with high-speed rail and the benefits that would bring to the economy, aside from obviously moving in the direction of having more or less you want to say everyone's going to drive an electric car. That is very ambitious. Of course, when you're dealing with the issues of charging stations, Michael, you mentioned you drive a Tesla. The supercharging stations does make the difference when it comes to charging quickly. But only Tesla has that. I believe there's another car that may have it.
You are so off on the tangent.
I'm sorry. This is what happens when you read a book like this. But ultimately, I do think that getting people to drive green cars is not hard, but I do think we must have high-speed rail in the United States. How do you guys feel about that?
Well, the first thing I would observe is, timing is everything here. And that's one of the big challenges, obviously, with the transition like this. The book has in its subtitle, Transforming the Global Economy by 2050. The latest IPCC reports are suggesting that we already might be dated with our book, that it might be, sooner than that. And the longer we go before we make significant reductions, that kind of end date for where we need decarbonization moves closer and closer to where we are today. Long-winded way to say how do we get quick transitions, right? I think if we're optimistic about any sector, it is about transportation and the potential for electrification of vehicles. That can happen surprisingly fast when the economics kind of get aligned here. And we're quickly approaching a point where it's not even necessarily that people are going to be buying electric vehicles because of some great concern about the environment or climate change. It's just going to simply be the cheaper, better option available on the road. In terms of high-speed rail, obviously that would be a wonderful addition to our transportation mix. I would love to see that occur. My concerns would be exactly the ones you identified, right? Like the politics around that, and then just the time to build infrastructure. One of the things I would observe in the US is we've built our communities largely around the idea of having a car. And so the ability for high-speed rail to be useful really depends on the community and where you're living. One of the other areas I just would add that we talk about that's going to be harder to decarbonize is air travel. There are efforts to look at even like battery-powered planes. There's some weight issues and the like you can imagine. There, I could see high-speed rail really being a wonderful substitute for like shorter haul flights that you might be able to use rail instead of air.
Yeah, I wanted to ask something, and I know that I didn't read it, but one of the things I think about, like if everybody switches over, let's say everybody switches over to electric cars, we're still on the grid, we're still fossil fuel. Okay, so I mean the emissions. I get the emissions are better and that's a good thing, but we're still relying on fossil fuel and we're still trying to sort of maintain our lives exactly as they are and substitute renewable energy. And I have some serious doubt as to us ever being able to do that. And that the future is going to be in smaller, sustainable communities and not this, like, I just don't see how we're going to be able to sustain everything with fossil fuel, period.
Becky, do you want to take that one? On the,
yeah, I mean, really, is the electric car a significant enough?
Yeah. So, I mean, clearly, electrification of transportation only, green, it only happens if it's supported by a clean grid, right? And so it's great if we can move everyone over to electric vehicles. But simultaneously, we need to not just green the grid, but modernize it, upgrade it, right? Upgrade it to be able to handle bi-directional trading of electrons and other things. And that's a massive undertaking. So yeah, I mean, I think that's the challenge that we started to see in looking across these industries is that there is no single bullet, silver bullet, and the greening and electrification of many of these industries depend on the greening and the greening of the infrastructures that support them, right? And so that is a huge challenge.
Yeah, I'd just add, a lot of the way in which we could get to decarbonization, a lot of what people talk about is electrifying not only transportation, but other sectors as well, like we talked about buildings and the like. All of that is contingent on us being able to decarbonize electrical generation. So in that future state, if we can get there, you're going to get a lot more demand for electricity, and we're going to need to build out, massive amounts of renewables, battery storage. Nuclear could be a part of that, though. It's interesting to note that nuclear isn't really being pursued much here in the United States or even globally at this point, even though people always mention it.
You're jumping ahead. You're literally catching me.
Because when we started this podcast, actually, one of our first guests was Michael Schellenberger.
Yes.
And it was about nuclear energy. So, I mean, I've sort of been interested in that, for a while.
I'm coming for you, Mike, because
right,
I've got one here for you. We absolutely cannot have hydraulic fracturing in our economy. We can't have it. It is way too destructive. There are way too many communities, especially in the rural parts of the country. Colorado even comes to mind. Communities get destroyed. Their clean drinking water is devastated from fracking, as well as the man-made earthquakes that get created from this. And you brought up a great point, which is I actually do think that the next phase of nuclear energy is how we're going to deal with one of the biggest topics you mentioned in the book is intermittency. So if we're going to be able to deal with the shortcomings of particularly solar and wind, which is it's not always windy, and it's not always light outside. You have to be able to deal with that. And I believe that the new technology in terms of nuclear is how we transition away from coal and natural gas. How do you guys feel about the next, the next integration, if you will, of, as you said, now a lot of people are talking about nuclear, but it is the best option we have if we're going to get away from fossil fuels.
And I think the challenge again is that you could argue the regulatory costs, the not in my backyard problems with building a nuclear plant has made it very difficult to build. There were countries like France who actually had massive penetration of nuclear, upwards of 80-90% of their generation was there. They've actually been rolling back. Japan, not surprisingly, rolling back from nuclear. So again, I don't disagree with you that it should and could be part of that transition in that future state, but it's just interesting to note there's just not a lot of activity in that space. We do know that there is some really interesting innovation happening in what they call modular nuclear, so smaller nuclear plants that could reduce some of the risks associated with the larger plants we're kind of used to in society. And there very well could be additional advances that occur that make it a more attractive piece of the puzzle here. But just right now, it's just not actively really being pursued by electric utilities and the like.
I think that people are fixated in like a 1950s mentality of what nuclear is, and they're just not capable of understanding. And it hasn't been presented either. It's been sort of like it's been presented in a very fearful way. That's just generally what you see in the news, are all the horrible things. And it's never presented rationally.
Becky, if you want to chime in, I mean, my thought is that the reason why nuclear doesn't get as much of a platform is because it actually could, I'm trying to get the right word, but it could actually undercut a lot of what the fossil fuel industry relies upon in terms of economic sustainability. And I think that if we did have nuclear, that would hurt them a lot. And anytime you notice an industry that could mitigate the problem but isn't being talked about, there's probably a good reason behind it.
Well, and the other challenge that nuclear, at least traditional nuclear, when we're talking about large nuclear, it's extremely expensive to build new facilities, right? And a good portion of nuclear in the US is going to age out in the next 10, 15 years. And so we're faced with the challenge of, do you invest in those facilities so that they can last longer? Do you invest in perhaps modular nuclear that could be rolled out, commercialized, distributed more quickly and less costly? So, I mean, I think there is still a role to play here for nuclear. And last time I was listening to someone from the DOE speak about some of the things that they are working on, SMRs was on the list. So, I mean, I think this is a place where the federal government can make a huge impact in terms of investing in new technologies and helping to scale and commercialize them.
That's a great point. And again, the modular concept of nuclear energy, I think, is really what you need. And again, Michael, you did bring up the idea of not in my backyard. Well, the same can be said of fracking as well. And so we're kind of in one of those tricky situations, but I do think that that's a very good transition to the construction component of what you talk about, because look, love him or hate him, Elon Musk obviously has been a very strong proponent of new construction being completely carbon neutral. The solar panel roofs that get built, I think that's a great concept. And again, a lot of times we as Americans, we're extremely vapid in the way we like things presented to us. A lot of people didn't want to drive an electric car early on because it looked like a space mobile. They would rather drive a car that looks like a car. So changing the body style was very important. And the same is true, I believe, of solar panels. A lot of people don't necessarily want to see, solar panels on their roofs, but the new construction concept that Tesla came out with is to basically have these solar panels on the roof, and you can't really tell that they're solar panels. It looks like it's just part of the construction of the home. So I'm curious as to what your thoughts are on that. And then another issue that I don't think it's talked about enough, we have so many dilapidated properties all throughout this country. And all these developers try to do is just build more and more and more, where, again, it is a cost factor, it's a time factor, but there seems to be a lot of empty space that could be utilized if we simply went through the process of, obviously deconstructing some of these older properties that are not useful anymore and could build them up into green space. Your thoughts on that, guys?
Yeah, so I think, first of all, I think you're exactly right that there's an opportunity here to build what we would call kind of distributed power systems. So if you think about the traditional way that we, generate electricity, it's, large plants that are then tied into an electrical grid that then you consume that electricity. I think the future vision that people are seeing is, imagine people have a battery powered electric vehicle in their driveway. They've got some solar panels on the roof. Maybe they have a battery stack in the garage, and these can work dynamically with the grid, so that at various times you're consuming electricity, and at other times you're actually producing electricity that you sell back to the grid. And what that allows you to do is it allows you to start to deal with that intermittency problem in some really creative ways. We didn't get to talk about this with nuclear, but nuclear is very good as a base load, but you don't really ramp up and down nuclear power plants. So what you really need is to be able to hit the changing demand that you have over time for electricity over the course of, let's say, the day. And so if you have, again, batteries in the home and solar on the roof, you can start to create these kind of dynamic markets here of trading of electricity that allows you to kind of solve the intermittency problem and actually kind of reduce the cost of producing electricity. Now, the challenge, you pointed out, is how do we then convince builders and retrofitting existing construction to adopt these types of technology? And that's where, in the book, we talk about policy kind of writ large, and hundreds of different things that could be done on a local level or a state level to try to change building codes and the like, to try to drive some of these changes.
I definitely agree. And Becky, please.
Yeah, no, maybe I'm jumping into our favorite sector a little bit too early in the podcast, but I would love to see some of that space utilized for vertical farming, right? Like, how cool would that be?
It's very cool.
Yeah. But look, talking about buildings, at least in my research and in talking to people in the industry, building green buildings or electrifying new buildings shouldn't be a problem. I think it's an education problem. I think it's educating architects, construction worker, construction companies and the like of what's available to them and the benefits of it. I think the big problem is turning over the existing stock of buildings. That's where it gets costly. And that's where you need, some specific green financing or other ways, creative ways to incentivize the turnover of the existing stock of buildings.
And I would just add, again, investments on the grid side as well from electric utilities. The idea of smart grid and building out a modern grid is going to be important to this.
Yeah. And what is the incentive to, say, Florida Power and Light? Because generally they're not on our team. So
they're also an energy monopoly.
Well, right. So, but that's who runs the grid. So, that's how do you get them to be on our team?
I mean, electric utilities are an interesting sector, right? There are these kind of quasi-monopolies, often heavily regulated, right, in terms of even the prices that they charge and the like. So I think, that creates both barriers, but also creates opportunities. And we've seen this through policies, renewable portfolio standards, for example, that are driving a lot of the adoption of renewables currently on the grid, being kind of required by law to do so. I think what is fearful, what people worry about, right, is that despite our needs to make these changes, people still want to have cheap electricity that is reliable. And so what we're talking about is massive capital expenditures that utilities need to make. And so the real question is kind of, what will the consumer bear? And if not, then who's going to subsidize that? And so, you talk to utilities, many of them would say, hey, if we could pass on the cost of building out this massive, change in infrastructure to the consumer, we'd be happy to do it. That's not the reality that they often, live in there. So I think it's going to have to be a combination of things, subsidies, regulatory approaches, working hand in hand with utilities to get them to make this transition. The good news is, we talk about this, is that in terms of the cost curves we're seeing for like solar and wind, they are now cost competitive with things like natural gas in many applications. Now we still have the intermittency problem. We have to combine that with batteries. There's still a lot going on there. But increasingly, the utilities are just simply incentivize themselves to adopt these technologies, at least utility scale renewables, because the economics are favorable.
That is a great point. And one of the things that I actually thought about when I was living in a townhome community is the idea of, you want to call it like a solar co-op, or any opportunity that is going to allow through the HOA to basically have, more or less bulk pricing for, 150 units, let's say, or more, that would be agreeable to going with a green technology like solar. I mean, to me, I think that that's immensely important and something that would definitely help mitigate it. But as we know, a lot of these HOAs and organizations, they have their own relationships that they typically form with, any of these energy conglomerates. And of course, in Florida, it's a big problem because we have an energy monopoly. I mean, Florida Power and Light is owned by NextEra Energy, which is one of the biggest probably in the world. And so dealing with that roadblock is a big problem. But I do think that one of the things we've noticed with the climate movement, it's mostly made up. I mean, again, most people believe in it, but it is a very youth-driven movement. And I think their righteous energy is good, but their strategy is not sound, at least not yet. And so the question is, how do you make it sound? And I do think things like this, like solar co-ops, I think could be very valuable. How do you guys see that in terms of more community-based energy, instead of dealing with, let's say, fossil fuels? Now, a lot of the community could be run on solar, for example.
Yeah, I mean, you want to go ahead, Becky?
No, go ahead, Mike.
I was going to say, no, absolutely. I mean, I think, again, it's in essence treating a market that looked like a traditional, we generate electricity, we provide that to you, to a world in which we would call it like a two-sided market maker. Even think of like, Airbnb or Uber, right? Connecting producers and consumers. That's what the future of our electrical generation could look like. So as you're saying, you could have co-ops, you could have HOAs, you could have just individual homeowners. No longer are they just consuming electricity, but now they're producing it as well. And that creates this opportunity for the electric utilities, if they see it, to serve as this intermediary in the exchange of electricity. And that could be a very lucrative position to be in, actually, depending on how they price it and consider it. But it's a different mindset. And I think that's what's so hard. It's very different than saying, we are going to produce electricity and distribute it to you, to suddenly saying, we're going to be a facilitator for the exchange of electricity across what could be millions of sources of generation.
Well, it's one of those things that maybe shouldn't be commodified and maybe should be part of just public service, sort of like things like healthcare and roads and, crazy things. And maybe then it wouldn't be this way. It would all be in what is our best interest overall, So this to me is a federal government problem, bigger than anything. All of it is.
Yeah, I think we want to have the private sector play their part, but of course that is not something that they are able to do. They can't cover everything. That's the thing. Yeah. And so that's where the federal government has to play a role. But our federal government, unfortunately, is bought and paid for by corporate special interests. So we're fighting.
They're all working together.
A very tough battle right now when it comes to, how are we going to get through, again, we still have these pipelines that are getting built for whatever reason. They don't need to be built. Again, most of the energy we don't even see. They get transferred all over the world, and it's all for profit. It's all for shareholders. So again, a lot of this is really, a question of when does there become a big enough movement inside the halls of the Capitol, as well as a lot of these movements that are happening on the outside. We do have a good question that I do want to bring in from Blaine Jensen, and that is your thoughts on energy conservation. Now, of course, Michael, you do talk about this in the book. We're not really at a point right now where we're able to store the energy from, let's say, the wind farms and the solar fields. But that is a technology. I'm curious if you're familiar as to where that stands, and if we are anywhere near where we need to be, or could be in the near future, as far as being able to do energy storage based on what we're able to receive from clean energy sources.
So how about I'll tackle the energy storage one, and then Becky, I want you to tackle the building one, because that's your
energy efficiency
one of your
one.
areas of expertise.
Yeah.
On the battery and the storage question here, or the storage question, obviously the use of utility scale battery storage for renewables, for solar and wind, is beginning to get implemented. There's still some cost consideration on the cost of storage. There is questions about simply can we build the scale of batteries that are needed to make solve the intermittency problem. There are other ways in which we can think about storage. Old ideas, like if you have an old hydro dam, you pump water up, when you have excess electricity, back up to the reservoir, so then you can run it through again and generate electricity. But it's going to need to be a huge part of the puzzle here. It is not just about solar panels and wind. Batteries, important obviously for transportation, but equally important for our electrical grid. Becky, you want to tackle the energy conservation one?
I do. So as I mentioned earlier I did spend 15 years consulting EPA on the Energy Star program. So I have quite a bit of knowledge around energy efficient products and buildings and the like. And I think energy efficiency still has a role to play, right? Like, we need to look at energy consumption, just consumption in general in this country, in this world, across the globe. And we need to slow that, right? Because that's only going to help us decarbonize quicker, right? So I don't think that, we don't talk about it in the book. We mention it in a couple industries that it still continues to be important. And I have seen firsthand the impact that energy efficiency has had on reducing energy consumption. And it's been amazing. And I think it should continue. I think the argument that Mike and I make is to truly decarbonize by 2050 and avoid significant climate impacts, we need to start thinking about zero. How do we get to zero? And so I think energy efficiency helps drive it down, so it's maybe easier to get to zero within the time frame given. But we need to be thinking bigger.
Yeah. I mean, this is where we talk about centralization and decentralization. And like, in my mind and in my universe, and hopefully not too far off in my future, I want to live in a small, sustainable community where we have a farm co-op and everybody can walk to where they need to go. And I feel like we're so dependent. We've created a society that's so heavily driven that we're like junkies.
Well,
we're like fossil fuel junkies.
Ironically, Charlottesville in many ways is a lot like Asheville. There's a lot of similarities in terms of the way that the communities are constructed. Charlottesville is it's a big small town. It's a small city, whatever you
I want chickens. Like I want chickens and bees, and I think that the goal should be for us to change our lifestyles, not to try to find energy sources to keep up with our ridiculous lifestyles. Like this is where I sound all hippie. I know.
Well, that's also that's the big thing about politics in the state of Virginia. It's two states. It's, I forgot what the slang is, but it's Northern Virginia and it's everything else. And so, essentially, you have basically this global influx of people that have moved into McLean, Alexandria, Fairfax, and places like that. And they more or less dominate the political landscape. The problem is that it's what you like to call a concrete jungle. It's basically just people on top of people on top of people on top of people.
We're not supposed to live like this. No. I've always said that people are not supposed to live on top of each other. They're just not. That's not how we're meant to live.
I personally am looking at potentially getting land in either Western Virginia or Western North Carolina. And one of the areas I happen to love is the Shenandoah Valley region, which is not too far from where you guys are. There is this, sort of comparable mix between urban, but not overabundance of urban living, coupled with suburban living, but not an overabundance of suburban living, and then nature, rural type living. Central Virginia, Southwest Virginia, especially, it really does incorporate a lot of what you need. You don't want to just be urban. You don't want to just be rural. You want to be able to have, a little of each. And I think that that's what's really appealing. And it's not, listen, Charlottesville is not cheap, but when you compare it to, any of the suburbs that surround Washington, D.C., it is cheap. So it's like I said, it goes without saying that there is a way to do this. And I do think that people are somewhat willing to change, but this transitions into the elephant in the room, the biggest one of all, which is, of course, agriculture. Trying to get people to change their living habits, trying to get people to change their eating habits. It is not easy to do because you don't have to drive a specific car. There's always going to be the sticklers who, want to drive a gas guzzler from the 70s. Okay, fine. But that's an anomaly. That's not the norm.
Try taking away their bacon.
Right.
You were to ask anybody, what is the number one food that you consume today that is detrimental to a carbon footprint and enacting a larger carbon footprint? What would be the one food that most people would say they could not give up? Guarantee you bacon's number one. So when you tell people that we can no longer have pigs or we can no longer have cows or chickens.
But we can, just not in factory farms. See, that's the thing. There is a way to do this. So like, would you guys talk about, we've had somebody on before that's talked about it's not permaculture, but where the animals are grazing naturally and the crops are rotating so that the animals are working like symbiotically right. And not what we have. And would people still be able to have their meat, and which parts of agricultural and the industry, because it isn't just the meat, it's all of it. And it's the transportation of fruits and vegetables. Like, it's all of it. What's the part of it that you think is what we could absolutely do something about?
Well, let me start with the challenge side, and then we can dive into like what the solution might be. So the first observation is the world population is still growing. We're about 7 billion people. We'll probably need to get to at least 10 billion people. Will happen, and we'll have to learn how to feed that larger society. So this is an industry sector that has to grow. No pun intended. And so that's the first part. The second part is we need to do this obviously in a way that reduces its footprint, which includes not only the ways in which we grow food, but also the use of land. So one of the big climate drivers is when we take forested land and cut it down to allow grazing of livestock or for growing of crops there. So how do we do this in a way that doesn't require further deforestation is the second thing. Third thing is, as countries have generally industrialized, they tend to favor more protein-rich diets. That doesn't necessarily mean it has to happen that way, but that is what has happened. And that means there's parts of the world that are maybe going to become more carbon intensive moving forward as they desire a more protein rich diet. I do worry that, we can talk about different farming practices, organic farming and all its different forms and the like. One of the challenges is, how do we produce enough food to feed the world's population? And it's not clear that those types of practices, buy local and the like, which are popular here in the United States, works for the entire globe. And unlike some of the other industry sectors that we look at, take something like cement. If you take the top 12 cement companies, you're covering a large part of the cement production in the world. We have literally millions of farmers, everything from large ag to, individual, family farms. How do you get behavioral change and changes in consumption across such a vast, diffused industry? So like I said, this one is really, really tough to tackle. So Becky, how are we going to tackle it? What's the solution?
She's the problem solver. You're just full of problems.
I'm just showing the problem. She's going to solve them for us.
Hey, thanks, Mike. Thanks for teaming me up like that. How are we going to solve it? That's a loaded question. So I think, what's interesting is to your point about differences in consumption across the world, and we can sit here in the United States and talk about Whole Foods, access to Whole Foods, and our ability to have our own farm and chickens, and buy organic, and we have access to alternative proteins. I mean, I'm a big fan of Impossible Burger. But
He eats Franken food.
Yeah. So I'm a big fan, and I think there's a lot of promise on alternative proteins. But to Mike's point, even if we solve it here in the U.S., we've got bigger problems globally in solving it. And I don't think people right now, unfortunately, in our country are very interested in solving other people's problems around the world. So
we're not solving the problems of the people here.
Right.
We can't.
That's right.
Flint, Michigan still doesn't have clean water. So we're obviously, we have our own problems.
Yeah, exactly. So, but yeah, I mean, it's a big problem. And I think, but what I'm hopeful about is if you look at, there are some examples where changing consumer choice can move the food and ag industry. If you look at antibiotics, the use of the broad application of antibiotics across herds, just to make sure that none of them get sick, instead of pinpointing the ones that do need to be treated. I think precision farming has stepped in to really help with that. And I think the biggest driver was consumer concern about broad use of antibiotics. So I think that's a good example of consumer choice can move the needle in some of these industries. If you look at alternative milks, 10 years ago, I think there was some soy options available. I used to find rice milk back in the day in some obscure aisle. 10 years later, now you see about 30% of, at least where I live, about 30% of the options are alternatives. Now you've got a zillion alternatives, and then you have to choose, which one's right for you. But I mean, I think this is an industry that does probably more than any other industry respond to consumer choice. So I'm hopeful, but it is a hard one to solve.
And then really, what does that do in terms of decarbonization? You might be, like one thing you were just talking about, like the milk substitute. So I've never gave my kids regular milk. I think to me, it's gross unless you would nurse on a cow. We're not supposed to drink milk of another species. Like, it's all kinds of gross, but we were soy, and then we were almond, and now we're oat. And apparently oat has less of an environmental impact than almond, because almond milk, it's like an excessive amount of water in places like California that have water restrictions and so on and so forth. And I feel like once you start unraveling it, it's like we can't eat anything. So ultimately, it seems like the strategy is to tackle it at the production end, because people are going to be eating whatever they're like. We can only stop eating so many things.
Yeah.
I think that's, consistent with kind of our overall viewpoint, is that while behavioral change would be wonderful in any of these dimensions, right? Really hard to drive at the end of the day. And the nice thing about technological shifts is that when they occur, and when we always talk about, like, on the current dimensions of merit of why you might buy something, if it meets those needs, the markets can diffuse it pretty quickly then, right? And if you look over the last few decades, we've seen an acceleration at the rate at which new technologies, once they become favorable, diffuse. You think about something like smartphones, or now we're seeing like cloud computing, they diffuse pretty quickly. They don't necessarily require changes in our consumption behavior to drive that. Not to say, again, it would be wonderful to get that. It's just hard to do. Like, how do you convince Americans to stop eating beef, right? And we talk in the book about, like, yeah, there's policy responses. We could create like a cow tax. I can't even imagine, what the political response would be from like a congressional bill suggesting that we tax meat products.
Try that in Texas. Try that in Texas. See how that goes.
Exactly. So, we definitely favor, when there are technological transitions that can occur that don't require that type of kind of demand-oriented either regulatory or just behavioral change. That would be great. But to Becky's point, I'm not sure in agriculture there is no technological, silver bullet here, as we've said many times, and even less so than we've seen in some of these other sectors here. I mean, there's things like lab-grown meat that are kind of, yeah, exactly. That's the reaction of a lot of people.
I don't do Frankenfood. I do not do Frankenfood.
I've been quiet here for a while. Michael, you've heard of Memphis Meats, I assume?
Yes.
Okay. So I do think that that's probably a solution. I know a lot of people, and this is not Frankenfood. That's not what this is.
Okay.
So basically it's cell recreation of the actual meat. And again, if you're going to do it, this is kind of, it's akin to embryonic stem cell research. It's basically, it's sort of that same, it's touching on that same area that a lot of people think this isn't right. But you know what? It's the only way that we could actually allow people to eat their fried chicken and hamburgers and not feel guilty about what they're doing to the environment if, cell recreation of the actual animal is able to be done for eating. Hey, listen.
I just can't.
Just
you're talking, it's like I'm picturing like clone body snatcher
That's not what it
meat. I don't
That's
know.
not what it is.
I'm fascinated with clean meat. I agree. I mean, I think there's a lot of, and Mike laughs at me when I get excited about it, but I think there's a lot of potential there for people that, they look at Impossible or other alternate proteins and they're like, that's not beef. That's not the real thing. I mean, this could be something that brings them along. I think what's going to be incredibly important for clean meat is how it's messaged to the general public, how it's, what it says on the packaging, and their comfort level, to go that route. But I also think that there's a lot of benefits in terms of land use, environmental benefits, carbon benefits for going that route. And I don't know if that's more weird than walking into a slaughterhouse and seeing what happens to beef now. I mean, it's all
okay. Let me be very clear. I would full on support going in that direction because it reduces our carbon footprint. It's better for the environment, all of that. I support it 100%. I think you all could everyone should have at it. Personally, not my thing. I'd rather have a black bean burger. Would rather keep my
and that's the joy of it. There can be options. I mean, I think in all of these
people having their cloned meat.
But we still have about 200 to 250 million people in this country who want to eat burgers at least once a day.
In my house, they cook flesh patties regularly.
So if you're going to deal with that, I think that there is definitely ways to do it. I think that there's a lot of, there's a lot of small business, even like chic restaurants that would absolutely be willing to try it if they know that there's a market for it. I mean, look, we just had this really popular, vegan burger. I'm forgetting the name, the one that's in Davie that just opened up. There's a number of these places around here. Burger Hive. There's a number of these places where people want to eat. You can see it, just like people want to drive the electric car.
Yeah, there's definitely a demand for alternative meat products.
And Michael, as a professor, I have no doubt that you've probably communicated at length with your students. A lot of them are going vegan. Like, this is not like a fad or anything like this. They really believe in this and they're really willing to do it. If that wasn't the case, because we still have some semblance of a free market capitalist system where, the supply will be there if the demand is there. And so the fact that people actually want to eat non-meat products, they are making that a much more of a mainstream thing. And Becky, as you've alluded to, I like the, Beyond Meat burger. I don't have it all the time, but if you want to have that texture and that taste that's similar to eating red meat, then that's what you go with. I'm a pescatarian. I limit, once in a blue moon, I may have some turkey, but at the end of the day.
He had turkey tonight and I kicked him out of here.
Well, listen,
how you are ever going to be an elected official? I don't know how that's even possible, because you just don't have a filter. You don't know when to not say anything.
Does anyone have a filter in politics these days? I'm not.
not real people. The
After the
people
game-
you don't want the people with the filters.
The
They're
truth
not
of,
real.
you know what
No.
the truth of the matter is, we had a president for 4 years that had no filter, and as much as that really upset tens of millions of people, there were tens of millions of people who are like, God, I wish every politician was like that.
You know
So-
what? Because people who know how things are know that he just was the nasty face behind what's already been happening anyway. Like he didn't.
Yeah.
He
he's
just brought them out of
horrible.
the woodwork.
Exactly.
Yeah.
He just
Yeah.
exposed it so much more.
And it's a lot. And you know, even though he's not there now, it's almost impossible to put that cat back in the bag.
Right. We've seen the man behind the curtain.
And not
now.
only that, you're seeing that right now because, of course, with this monumental legislation, the reconciliation bill, which is really the first piece of legislation that could deal with the climate crisis, you're seeing the mask being pulled off and how hard corporate interests are fighting to stop this from happening. Because to them, they don't give a damn what's going to happen 50 years from now. They want to know what's happening 5 days from now. To them, that's all that matters. It's like, well, if we're going to lose any money, we're not having it, so we're going to fight it tooth and nail. But I think the average consumer is not now starting to observe that and say, that doesn't make a lot of sense. It's time we start looking for alternatives. And I think that, in a way, is a good thing. But as you guys alluded to, this is the toughest nut to crack. There is no question that trying to mitigate people's habits, especially when it comes to food consumption, is the hardest thing to do. But I do think that cell recreation of meat is probably the best option in terms of how we're going to get, because there's a lot of people who simply are not going to eat these artificial meat products. But if they can be convinced that maybe a cell recreation of the actual food, you're not going to notice the difference in taste. Can you bring it to market is really the question. Do you guys see that as a mitigating solution to our problem?
And I would just observe, you know, there are dozens of ventures out there, some of them, you know, getting hundreds of millions of dollars in investment and valuation. So the market's kind of speaking on this, that at least there are those seeing potential in this path forward, you know. Despite your you know reaction to having lab grown meat, you know there is a belief that this is coming here.
Yeah.
You know,
No, and I'm
on
supportive. I'm supportive of everyone's right to eat lab grown meat.
Yeah.
So
I was going to comment, you know, delving into areas maybe I should avoid, but like on the politics side, you know, the one thing to realize, and I think is sometimes lost, is we're talking about technology shifts within industries. Now that type of disruption creates winners and losers. And we focus on the loser side, who are then fighting desperately to, you know, maintain a status quo. But, you know, to be a little too cute, you know, technology generally wins. And so those fights are often, you know, losing battles here. And, you know, I point out, you know, we have literally, you know, 500,000 jobs, if not more at this point, in solar. And we still have only about 50,000 jobs in the coal industry. And yet, you know, we treat it as if this is going to destroy jobs and this is going to, you know, hinder economic growth. A lot of these clean industries are the growth industries. These are the industries that are going to create economic growth. They're going to create new jobs. Now, there's differences, right? Like with coal, it tends to be concentrated in certain communities in certain parts of the country. So West Virginia, Kentucky, Wyoming. Those communities have something to lose here, and we shouldn't, you know, dismiss that out of hand. And I think that's where the politics starts to come in, right? You can probably, you know, pick the opinion of a certain senator on where they stand on some of these based on which industries are located in their state or not. That creates barriers, but it could also create opportunities, right? There'll be, you know, states who are wanting to take the lead on solar and take the lead on electric vehicles because they recognize that's what's going to create jobs for their communities. And so I think we should be paying attention to the role companies are playing in our politics, but also recognize there's even some opportunities here, that it's not a monolithic thing called business that's like uniformly resisting these things. It's going to depend which sector you're in about where you're going to stand on these.
We've at least evolved enough from the days of W being our president and saying he simply doesn't believe in climate change because God talks to him every day. You know, we're at least not dealing with that, which of course is just a
We've made some progress,
yeah,
I suppose.
Or we could just say it's totally a hoax and China's mitigating it. It's totally their fault. It's China's fault. China does it all the time. So
Just love to say China.
yeah, well, again, but the thing about Trump is that people didn't really take him seriously.
No, he's a buffoon.
So again, I do think we're past that point now. We recognize where a lot of the problems are. Now, of course, how do you deal with it? That finding the solution, it's not that hard. I think we've definitely touched on some really great points tonight, guys. Obviously, the more people go vegan, the more that reduces the carbon footprint. Having cell options on, meat, I think is obviously another one. Transportation, electric cars and high-speed rail, energy, solar, wind, geothermal, biofuels, hydroelectric, and of course, I do think that nuclear does have a role to play. Modular nuclear is a great idea. Then, of course, when it comes to construction, there are a lot of ideas, as you know, that Tesla has employed, and I think a lot of others as well are doing that to, mitigate the problems of steel, petrochemicals, and cement. And then, of course, the last one to close with, which of course is industrial, the military-industrial complex. That is the biggest carbon footprint emitter on the world scale. On the domestic scale, it's agriculture, but on the world scale, our military-industrial complex harms this environment more than anything else. And dealing with that problem, knowing that we spend almost $1 trillion a year on an industry that really only needs maybe a quarter of that, if it needs that much, so much of it is wasted on, whether it's, and again, you guys are in Virginia, so Northrop Grumman, Lockheed Martin, Boeing, Raytheon,
General Dynamics,
all industries that our Congresswoman and our 2 U.S. senators are very familiar with, but they are the reason why, in so many ways, that global problem is so devastating. So, how do we deal with this? Because if there is an area where we do not have a silver bullet, it's on the military, because it's very hard to talk about this topic and control the narrative. The narrative is actually pretty simple, but trying to break through this wall of, oh, well, you don't support the troops, so you don't support America. Yeah, that's a very tough nut to crack, because so much of the rural parts of our country have soldiers in their family, and they see it as, well, you just don't want to support our families. They're very good at that. But the question now becomes, what do we do?
Yeah.
How do you see that fight?
How do you solve all the world's climate crisis and stop our military?
Yeah, you got to solve it all right now. So how do you?
Well, the military-industrial complex is, but I mean, and from what I'm understanding in your book, it wasn't that you're not addressing the military-industrial complex. It's that has all these other components in it. Is that because you're talking about all the things that you address, the different sectors are all things that are within that as well. So you were looking at the root of these issues, right? Like construction and the grid. But yeah, how do you solve the military-industrial complex problem?
So admittedly, that is not an area of focus in the book, not an area that I could really even, speculate on, not an area of expertise in any way of mine. I'm going to take your question and frame it a slightly different way. And this gets back to, what's at stake here. When I think about the impacts of climate change and what it could do to us as a global society, I think what I worry most about are the socio-political implications of climate change. People think about extreme weather. Obviously, they think about rising sea levels and how that might affect where they live. But I think about what are the political disruptions that could emerge from that. And we're arguably fast moving into a world where we're going to see resource scarcity, especially around things like water. We're going to see, we already do, of course. We're going to see things like perhaps, rising sea level causing displacements of massive amounts of people that lead to refugee crises that then destabilize adjacent countries. You see what's happening in Europe and some of the flight of people out of Syria, and now we're having a similar thing happen out of Afghanistan. Those are the types of disruptions that I think are we really feel climate change at the end of the day. So to your point about military intervention, these are the types of things that actually often lead to wars, right? These are the types of things that often lead to conflict here. And so if we don't address this issue, if we don't try to at least reduce the impact that we're seeing from climate change, again, we could be moving into a world where these types of conflicts are just going to be a regular occurrence and frequent.
Yeah, it's definitely intersectional.
There's no question that we need to continue having these conversations. You guys wrote a great book, and I think it's very important that if anybody, again, the decarbonization imperative.
It's not on audio. It's not. It's not on Audible though, is it?
Not. Well, Jen, unfortunately, is very. You're spoiled.
I am. I prefer to be read too, but I've gotten. Well, I like it specifically for nonfiction, and when the authors do it, it's like I'm getting a private lecture. It's really great. I don't think I would like it for fiction, but yeah, I've gotten really comfortable with the audiobooks.
Well, I have no problem reading.
Yeah,
we'll talk to our publisher, Becky. Maybe they'll let us read the book and do an audio.
It's so good whenever it's the person that wrote it. It's always better. It is.
Well, we actually do have a series of recordings for each of the sector reports that I am actually the narrator.
That's cool.
So you can get bits and pieces of the different chapters.
That's really cool. Yeah. Now that I appreciate.
Jen, I don't know if you two are familiar, but Jen did run for Congress in 2020 against Debbie Wasserman Schultz. She happens to be a representative that's very infamous, but she's infamous for reasons that more on the national scale have little to do with really the problems that exist with her representation here in South Florida, not the least of which is the fact that so much of her entrenchment is entangled with so many of these industries that are pillaging the environment. And so we need to recognize that so much of our representation on both sides of the aisle play a substantial role in why we're not getting where we need to go. But the importance of this book cannot be understated because it really gets to the crux of where the problems are. We highly recommend that you check it out. Any final thoughts for you guys? We really appreciate you coming on the podcast this evening.
No, well, thank you again for giving us the opportunity to. And I think, to end on an optimistic note, one of our points is that once you start to break this down again into its constituent parts, you can start to see where we can make progress. And from a policy standpoint, there are literally hundreds of different levers we can be pulling. And while some of those, you mentioned Caltech's, highly politicized, many of these should not be. I always like to say, like, technology, it does not have a political affiliation at the end of the day. It's politicized by others, but the technology itself does not. And so let's get to it. Let's bring about, the new technologies that we need, the new industries to create the new jobs. Like, these should be things that we could collectively get behind if we frame it in that way, instead of always framing things in a, us and them, it's either left or right type of a framework. And we end the book with a lot of suggestions, lots of suggestions for what could be done at the federal level, at the local level, at the individual level, at the corporate level even. Let's get to it. Let's get moving on it.
Yeah, guys, check out the book. It's called The Decarbonization Imperative, Transforming Global Economy. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
Is that right? Okay. And yeah, we need to all be on the same page with this. Thank you so much for coming on and talking with us.
Let's keep the conversation going. Michael Lenox, Becky Duff, thank you so much for coming on this evening.
You.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely.
Pleasure, guys.
Bye.
Take care.
You too. Well, definitely a great conversation.
So I don't know what happened with Aarika. I showed you that I sent the
she
email.
Unfortunately, there was a mix-up, and she's going to have to reschedule.
That's
she's
fine.
out in the field right now.
That's fine.
Those things happen.
Yes, especially for candidates. I fully sympathize.
And she's in California, so it's still light outside. She's still
probably
knocking
canvassing.
on doors.
Right?
She
No,
said she is.
again, tons
So
of
it's all good
sympathy. I highly recommend Camel Pack.
Oh yeah.
That's my number one recommendation for anybody that's canvassing. Get a Camel Pack. Wear it on your back.
So
it's
again,
easier than carrying a water bottle.
I think the solutions are there. I think that it's really just a question of so I think that it's really just a matter of figuring out how we're going to convince people. But the thing about American consumerism is you can't overwhelm them. you really have to focus on like a couple or maybe a few different things and just stick to it. Transportation is something that most people get, and I think there's a lot of momentum there.
I just have concerns about all of these different renewables and that the actual impacts that they do make that we're not talking about.
Well, like I said, I called out Michael because in his book he talks about fracking, and it's like, no. Fracking is an absolute no. It is a non-starter, and I will never get behind that.
And there's apparently a lot to be said about the mining of the lithium that's used for the solar panels. So the point is that these are fixes that also have their own issues that need to be addressed. And there was actually that book that I saw that those authors on that I wanted to get on the show to talk about that as well. I think that's like the follow-up discussion. Okay, so when you switch to renewables, what's that impact like? And
another thing, you know what? I know a lot of people don't want to hear it. Tough-ish. Is this planet capable of sustaining 11 billion people?
Uh-oh, you're talking about eugenics again. You're
going
crazy.
It's not talking about eugenics. It's
once
a
you
question
start
of
population control.
No, but it's a question of whether or not this planet is able to sustain that. And again, we do not have, decentralized planning. We have centralized planning. And that's it. And if you think that's bad in the United States, guys, it's even worse in India and China. So
China.
If you've ever seen what it's like in Bombay or Delhi, it's bad. People have seen the images of the Indian population riding on the trains, like riding literally on top of the train and sitting on the train. That's, again, it's not sustainable. We're not supposed to live on top of each other.
No.
So you have to ask yourself, where do we draw the line? And so every human causes some form of a carbon footprint. You add more, the carbon footprint gets more dense.
It's all about shit and glitter. I say everybody brings shit and glitter to the world. Your goal is to leave more glitter than shit on your way out. And yeah, that's generally
so
how
when people say that the planet can sustain itself, how is that possible? You only have so many resources to go around, and you're already getting them short right now. You want to keep adding more people to the planet? At some point, you have to say, we've got to do something about
and
this.
I will say this, I do not think big ag via people like Bill Gates is the solution in places like Africa.
No.
I don't think that's going to solve the food problem.
You want to talk about eugenics? That's where you got to worry about.
Yeah.
You got to worry about with people like Bill Gates.
Do you want to do news?
We'll do news and amuse. Final topic of the evening. And so...
Wait, put that away.
Speaking of the decentralization problem that we have. So, of course, homeless man taken to hospital after workers bulldozed down his tent with him still inside. Was this in Fort Lauderdale?
This was in D.C.
In D.C.?
This was in D.C., right in our nation's capital.
There you go.
Right in our nation's capital.
Well, as you know.
That is
Speaker
not,
Pelosi
nobody
does
knows
not
you're
want-
talking about Pelosi.
Speaker Pelosi does not want to see those things when
You
she walks
don't.
outside.
You do not do women well.
I agree. I don't.
You know, it's not your forte. So yeah. So this I'm putting in the world of, are you fucking kidding me? That's what that is.
Do you have to demonetize the show?
I do. I had to, because that's ludicrous. It's absolutely ludicrous. I don't understand how this is happening. This is just a matter of our priorities, people. We don't need to be bulldozing people. This is unacceptable. The amount of money that it took to do that probably could have been put into, like, making a little camper trailer for this guy instead of bulldozing him out of his tent.
But again, the idea is to keep the unfettered capitalist system running on this idea of fear. You will not have any help. You are basically doomed to fail. And that's what keeps people on their toes and not actually taking the chances that they should be taking to change this system. The system could actually be changed. And we're going to be having a conversation very soon with Andrew Yang, who will be coming on to talk about the possibility of a third-party movement that he's trying to form. And I got to tell you, the fact that they're coming after him as hard as they are tells me that the system as a whole really is precarious. This idea that it's okay to have homeless people, I think it's over 600,000 homeless people in the country.
Oh, there's got to be more than that. It was over 500,000 before we had the pandemic.
It's not even that. It's the fact that there are people who are probably homeless and they're not being listed as homeless. They may be in a very bad situation.
It's always going to be underreported.
When it comes to homelessness?
Yes. So you've
100%.
got to figure it's astronomical.
So I kind of just feel like we're at this point where the establishment tries so hard to stop. They used to not even acknowledge it, but now it's like ramped up to a 10. If there's even an inkling that what somebody is suggesting is different, deviates from the status quo, they go absolutely apeshit. hey, you already did it, so now now it doesn't
Yeah,
matter.
blame me.
But the truth is, that's really where we're at. Even the slightest deference from what's actually going on and not sticking with what we're doing, you see just how reactionary they've become.
Can we just stop bulldozing homeless encampments in general? Can we just stop doing that?
Not really.
People, can we just stop doing that? It's just, you know what? It's so unbelievably inhumane, and it makes me so sad. But speaking on a positive note, speaking about people that are unhoused, I have, GenCorps is back to putting together homeless care packs.
Want to show them?
Well, I will. I'll get up. Well, this is only part of it. It has a food provision in it too. So.
Yes, and there's no question that this is a very big deal. We've done this before. We've done homeless care packages. We will do them again.
Okay, so basically I have these really nice little individually packaged hygiene kits. I mean, they even have little packets of shaving cream, a little deodorant, little razor, like just different, it's a toothbrush, toothpaste. So these are going in bags, and I put in a Boost, I put in protein bar, I put in these little packs with the spoon with the tuna fish. I try to put protein in them. And so I basically now I'm just driving around with these care packs in my car and just handing them out. That's what I'm doing. Obviously, I would like to get a big amount of them to an event at some point and hand them out. We'll work on that. But basically, our GenCorps money is going into homeless care packs.
If we ever do like an environmental or in healthcare, rally or something down there, that's what we could do.
Yeah, I mean, I'm all about giving them out.
That would be a giveaway. That would be a great way to bring them in. Hey, I'm going to write that down.
So anyway, we're working on homeless care packs. Anyway, on to the Facebook whistleblower. If people have not seen, her name is Frances Houghton, Haugh.
And I got to be honest, there's no real revelation in regards to what she said. Most of it is stuff that we already knew. We just needed verification.
Correct.
That this was going on. It's again,
it's so nefarious.
Facebook.
It's so nefarious.
Well, Mark Zuckerberg is a sociopath. And I think everybody knows that. Most of them that get to that level are sociopaths.
And I would also like to say that the devil horns have nothing to do with him if in fact he is Jewish.
He actually is.
And again, I mean, I know he is because it's Zuckerberg and I know he's Jewish, but I'm just saying I put them on Elon Musk. I put them on Bill Gates. I put them on everybody.
Sorry,
so
but
not anti-Semitic.
We're very much about sticking it to people who lie through their teeth.
Right. So if you're basically a corporate whore or a plutocrat, I'm putting the devil horns on you, and I don't care what your faith is.
Or you're a coward who doesn't want to stand up to corporate interests, and you make an excuse saying that a Jewish person who grew up in North Miami, the second largest Jewish population.
I'm not an anti-Semite. I assure you, I'm not an anti-Semite.
So
I just put the horns on people that I think are nefarious.
Yeah, that's a fight you won't win.
So,
but the truth is, it again, Facebook, like a lot of other social media apparatuses, and Twitter's the same way, Instagram's the same way, TikTok's the same way. It's like a slot machine. You become addicted, and I was addicted. I mean, my social media consumption today is maybe an hour a day. Now, by most standards, you would say, well, that in itself is a nice chunk of time on social media. There were times where I was probably on there 4 or 5 hours a day. It's amazing how easily you can fall down the rabbit hole.
In all fairness to you, 99% of your interaction on social media is politics or work related, and it isn't really for you about social. Like, it isn't, you're not on there for like personal gratification. Like, look at this picture of me and all about me. Like, so in all fairness, you are distracted by it, but it's not.
Well, I have, well, listen, I'm friendly with somebody who won't mention who it is, but literally lives on social media and gets into arguments and conversations for hours. And it's like, what are you doing with your life?
You're sitting. So I would like to say, I think it's been 9 months now. How long has it been since I'm not on it all. And it's been really good.
It's a detoxification.
And it is, it's kind of like there was like this detox period. It's almost like you go through this like crash because you're so used to all the endorphins every time you get likes or hits. Like, if you haven't seen what was the name of the movie? The
Social Network.
No, that's the one with Zuckerberg.
Oh, The Social Dilemma.
The Social Dilemma.
Great.
Yeah, that's the movie that really, it's a documentary, but it also has like some actors in it and stuff. But it really is a very scary thing that's going on. There's absolutely brain manipulation and how you're reinforced and what you get likes and what the algorithms are. And it is completely sinister. And I don't say this in a conspiracy sort of way. It really is. But so this whistleblower really, who has worked at multiple different social media places. Like, this is someone very well versed
Yeah.
in this. I
And
highly
listen, we're
suggest you
gonna-
watch some of her
and look,
testimony.
we're actually going to be working with somebody who potentially could be help mitigating the fact that we do have a channel that doesn't get a lot of traction. But the truth of the matter is, our channel is not adjusted to move with the algorithm. And why is that? Because a lot of the channels that discuss certain topics, particularly in left independent media, it's all about shock value. It's all about, who can I dunk on today? Who can I gossip on today? Who can I piggyback on naming who out today? And, cross networking in that respect, but it's not really getting anything done. I would have loved for 100 people to be watching the conversation that we were having.
So
this
guys,
evening,
if you
which is beautiful.
haven't subscribed, please subscribe. Although I would imagine that anybody that's still lingering around is
Yeah,
subscribed.
the
but
10 to 15 people that are actually watching right now. We
which
appreciate you. We do.
love you.
But the reality is, the entire social media system, it's not just Facebook. Facebook just happens to probably be the most egregious violator of this. We put out it wasn't even a hard criticism. It was a soft criticism of AOC about a month ago about the fact that, she's really caught up in the whole celebrity culture thing. Now, that doesn't mean that she's a bad person or isn't fighting for what we're fighting for, but she's a little too close to that culture in which the people really don't want things to change. And she loves her spot. And so we mentioned that. And the next thing you know, this thing goes viral all over social media. Hundreds of thousands of people are seeing this. And I'm just thinking, because we softly criticized AOC?
Wait. We went viral?
Yeah.
Good.
No, but I'm saying that it was.
I don't care if it's bad. Look, as we all know,
You just said you care about this, and now you're saying you don't care. Which way is it?
what I'm saying is that
Hi,
I don't want to
hypocrite.
be. I don't want to be involved in it because it's brain toxicity that I don't want to endure. However, if you put something out there that gets us viral and gets us people watching our platform and the information we're putting out, then that's at least a good thing coming of it.
Yeah, and
That's
look,
what
if
I'm
we
saying.
put out like a topic of discussion, like for example, the fact that they're still trying to privatize the post office, and why is Louis DeJoy, who's also a GOP mega donor, mind you, the Postmaster General, it doesn't make any sense. And so we put something like that out, and tens of thousands of people have seen it now, which is great. But again, the social media algorithm is really based on controversy. It's based on infighting. It's
negative.
It's negative.
It's
negative
negative
energy. 99% of the time, it's negative energy.
It is, and it's meant to be, and it's meant to be addicting. It's like any other vice.
Yep.
To me, social media is, whether it's gambling, food addiction, alcohol, whatever it is that your addiction is, that you have a void that you're filling with something in an unhealthy, dysfunctional way that's affecting your life, that's an addiction. And I really do, to me, social media is no different than those. And it is actually very damaging. It's damaging to your emotional, mental health. It is an unrealistic vision. It is inaccurate information in a lot of cases. And it's unfortunate because it could be a good thing, as that's what that woman's testimony was about. This could be done, and the government can step in and regulate it as a utility, which it should.
It's a violation of the Sherman
And
Antitrust
so
Act.
there is a way to handle this where Facebook actually could be not having all these nefarious algorithms, and actually could be what it started as, which is me being able to see pictures of my friends' kids without getting people hating on me for this, that, and the other. So there is a way to manage this.
Yeah.
It is possible to do it. So, it's just not as profitable.
That again, they call it, outrage. Well, not outrage porn, but it really does make a difference. To me,
Lou loves cannabis.
they really. Hi, little munchkin.
She loves cannabis. She can't.
So, of course, we're in a situation where we're recognizing that social media in many ways is mitigated by the fact that so much of the consumed information is based on controversy. Kyler, friend of the show, thank you for tuning in.
We will
yeah.
look. We don't.
Absolutely.
We'll talk to anybody as long as. And I know Angel. I know Angel.
We know
Wait,
Angel
do I know
and
one? I know Angel
Paradise.
personally.
Yeah,
have
we
I
know
met one?
We know.
Forgive me if I have. If you are one, and I have met you, I just don't know exactly. I probably would if I see you, but I do know Angel. We'd be happy to have anybody on that is a non-corporate candidate. It's just a matter of getting in touch and setting up a date. And what is Florida's 13? Where is that?
That is Charlie Crist.
But isn't he okay? So what is?
There's a couple of people running in that seat.
Love Angelica.
Kyler, thank you so much. Angelica is awesome.
We've
We
had
absolutely
her.
support her. And she is somebody who is viable to win that race.
She's California, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so
California.
we need to. We will be starting to have panels, and I think we should do it state by state. I think it would be fun, like have the people we love from California on there. I think it goes towards coalition building in general. Like 'cause in hypothetical
we
world,
should
what if they all
probably-
won? Then they could all work together.
I think it's June. I think we should plan a trip for California and go out to,
You
especially.
just want to go on a vacay.
Well, I'm saying if we go to Southern California, we can, there's Aarika's district, and also forgetting the gentleman's name, Shervin, I think is his name. That's 30.
Yeah, Shervin. Oh, he was cute.
Yeah, Angelica's in 35, I think. But they're so close to. I mean,
Because if we're going to start vacationing, I want to go hit Washington.
Well, Washington D.C.
No,
Washington State.
Don't be silly.
I'm sorry.
We have a lot of good candidates in Washington State. But anyway, so we're going to
Yes.
start doing panels.
Yeah,
and
we
groups.
can do
But
that.
anyway, do you want to talk about the debt ceiling thing? Because I did, I'm very torn on the filibuster issue. I really tend to lean with Kyle Kalinske in the filibuster camp when we talk about that. It scares me to get rid of it. I mean, I could be convinced.
I just think
it's
that
not a
the
hill
fact
I'm
that
going to
this is,
die
well,
on.
again, the fact that it's this type of issue that they want to bring up, it's about the debt ceiling, which is BS. We all know it because.
But you can write that as an exception to the filibuster.
Well,
that's the thing Biden could do, is put it as an exception to the
Well,
filibuster.
he could also do the same thing if he wanted to expand Medicare to everybody, or if he wanted to have, announce a climate crisis.
it makes me nervous to completely abolish the filibuster, but I do like the idea of making it be where you have to actually stand there
I
and
just
do
think
it.
that there is a lot of hypocrisy in terms of how they go about doing business, but everybody knows that. And that
Oh.
again that is still the legacy of Bernie and Trump in many ways, is the fact that they really changed the dynamic in terms of the way people look at politics now. They don't want to be fed BS. They're tired of it. You can see it. Part of the reason I think that Governor DeSantis appeals to a lot of people is because he just has this no BS attitude. And unfortunately, guys, that appeals to more people than it doesn't.
It does.
It
It's
just
true.
does.
It does. And I'm loath to say that, but I do want to say just one more thing about the filibuster, why it concerns me, is let's say you get rid of the filibuster. Then the next time that we're in that minority position, stop it. You are not a turtle. Stop. It's only I know who you're doing, so no one else knows.
I don't have
That's
to say
Mitch
anything,
McConnell.
just the sound.
Whatever. So, but the next time we're in the minority, then we've lost any ability to do anything. So that's my concern about abolishing the filibuster. But I do think we should make it where they actually have to filibuster. And if you do that, you will absolutely reduce the amount of times that comes up, because they're not going to do it. We've made it too easy. They could just say, "Oh, filibuster," and now it's just that. No, you should have to stand on your feet and talk. Like you have to, if you want it, fight for it.
Well, I've definitely stood on my feet quite a few
Yes.
times before.
And that
to do
is
what
why.
filibuster.
So I do not like the idea of completely abolishing the filibuster. And there was something else
I understand
that we were
that as
gonna
well.
talk about tonight, wasn't there? Was there something that came up that I saw today that there was something? Oh my God, I so have like pothead brain.
Yeah,
There
you
is
keep
something that I
smoking.
can't help myself. Look, it's after happy hour. Although I don't necessarily wait until happy hour.
Let's
No,
see.
there was something that just recently that came up that I was like, I have to say something about that. Well, I'll table that. But anyway, guys, if you're not subscribed, please hit subscribe. If you're not patrons, and you could be a patron, we would love you to be a patron. You get the Lulu sticker. She's really cute. I mean, she really is so cute.
And more than anything else, if you guys believe in our mission and you like the idea of having care packages for homeless people, that is where your money for the podcast goes.
Yeah,
there is no salary here.
No, although as a disclosure, and this is why we're a 501c4, not a 501c3.
Yep.
We do political stuff. We are. I mean, our mission is transforming politics into service. So we're sort of dipped in both pools, and so we do donate to non-corporate candidates.
100%.
So far we Gen Core. So if you support us, so far you have donated to Elijah Manley, who we have had on the
State
show.
House 94.
Florida State House 94, who is, in my opinion, the future of everything that is good in politics.
Oh,
in
he
this
really
country.
is.
And I love him. And we've
we
also
do.
donated, everyone knows I love Elijah. And we've also donated to Aarika Smith who is running for U.S. Senate in the state of North Carolina. And so we will periodically, as an organization, donate to non-corporate candidates. So that is where your money goes.
And we
we have
feedback.
nobody on salary. We have somebody that we pay to sort of help with the website and edit and some stuff. But
we are going to be making a nominal investment for at least a month to see what we might be able to do in terms of the algorithm. We'll see if we can get more Patreons views on the show. It's an investment. It's going to be about $200 for the month. So we're going to test it out.
Right.
We know these guys.
Yeah, we're very transparent about our money because we don't have very much. So it's very easy to tell you where it's going.
But even if we had more of it, we would still be transparent.
Oh, for
There's
sure.
no reason not to do it.
I don't know that I wouldn't be able to do it from memory, probably. But
Well, again, like you said,
we're small potatoes.
we have people that come on the show and say, you guys do a great show. And we really appreciate it. We really do, guys, because we're doing this because we give a damn. Not because we're trying to be controversial or try to stir the pot.
No.
And, hey, who do you want to talk about tonight?
No.
Who do you want to...
And quite honestly, and I've said it before, the only self-serving thing I get out of this is getting to meet people that I want to meet that would otherwise I wouldn't be able just to have a conversation with. But because we have a podcast, so we could say, I'll forward something to him and say, oh my God, you have to see if you can get this woman. Did you see the woman from
Yes,
Nashville?
I already sent a message.
Okay. Like I watch a TED talk of somebody and I'm just I love them and I'm like, go get them on the show. And so I do use this to get to people that I would otherwise not get to, but in a very utilitarian manner to provide education and information. I try not to fangirl with people. There's some people that's more difficult than others. We are having Oliver Stone on for our Veterans Day show with Daniel Scherzen, and which I'm excited about. We are still not sure if we're going to have anyone else that's coming on. If anybody is connected to Jesse Ventura, that would be like our best pick. But yeah, we will be being joined by Oliver Stone on Veterans Day, which is huge for me. Like that's
Two things I want to shout out. Kyler, you're absolutely right. The California oil spill, again, we could have talked about it during the podcast, but again, what's the point?
Well, and here's
Everyone
why
knows.
this is why I didn't talk about this actually specifically, is because basically our entire episode tonight was really focused on climate crisis, that I wanted to hit other stories when we were doing news that weren't climate related. That was really the only reason. It is not because we don't care.
No, of course we do. But again, we are at the point now where we see and the damage it does to bird life and marine life.
And anyone who knows me knows I love birds, all kinds of birds.
This is at a point now where you have to stop getting shocked and sad. You need to get pissed off,
angry. And then you look at cases, and it is not without the irony to me that this is the same week that Steve Donziger got sentenced to 6 months for being in contempt of court for winning a case against Chevron.
As bad as things are, remember, guys, the night is darkest just before the dawn. They are running out of places. They can't run and hide anymore. So now they are getting desperate. They are. So you have to keep coming after them. And you have to keep talking about these solutions and recognizing that there is a path to do it.
And I do think, and I honestly do encourage people, if you are in the vicinity of people that are impeding progress, people like Kirsten Sinema, people like Ted Cruz, people like these absolute buffoons that are just sitting there and taking corporate money. And I don't even need to mention my representative by name.
And that to this day is still the biggest motivating factor of potentially doing this again. And it isn't a question of, we absolutely want to be on Capitol Hill.
No, I really don't. But what I will say is people who live in the vicinity of these people, and it doesn't even have to necessarily be your congressperson or a senator. It could be people that are impeding progress. It could be someone like Jeff Bezos or Bill Gates. As far as I'm concerned, these people should not have a minute of peace outside of their homes.
They should.
And I'm speaking nonviolently. But like what happened to Kirsten Sinema in the bathroom should happen to her every single time she's in public. Because when you have people, we are past decorum. We are so far past decorum.
And again, this is why we laugh when we see what Senator Sinema is doing, because guess what? It's exactly what our Congresswoman does. They run and hide. Our Congresswoman can't even go to a regular safe bubble event like last Saturday and not literally as soon as she's done doing what she wants to do is out the door. They
don't want to talk to people. They don't want to hear it. And look, they cannot build their moats wide enough.
No.
And all of these people, I mean, I know that we hear things about like the Occupy people and the setting up guillotines in front of people like Bezos' house and stuff like that. And I am not in any way talking about violence. It's all symbolic. But these people should not get a moment's peace. it is not okay, because what they're doing is against what most people want. It's not like we're the fringe group
Thank you, Matt.
coming at them from off the crazy side saying, we want these crazy things. We have the majority position and they are not doing what they're supposed to be doing. And they are insubordinate employees.
And more people need to be involved. That's the bottom line. There's so much, there's so much nihilism. There's so much acceptance of things being the way that they are. We got to get past that. And, you got to check your ego at the door. And a lot of people don't want to do that. And a lot of people are, they're online warriors in many ways. If you're not making the inroads that you need to make, and I will say this, I don't know for sure if Andrew Yang is on, if he's, I think he is onto something. I don't know if he's really there yet, but I will say this, his approach, with all due respect to People's Party, it's the right approach. It is credibility, which you must have. If people don't actually take you seriously, then you have no shot in hell. They are taking Andrew seriously. Why? Because they're smearing the hell out of him. Which
that means they're scared.
Means they're scared because they know that he could attract more people, such as Marianne Williamson, Joe Rogan, and Dave Chappelle. And if people like that,
and I like all those people tremendously, actually,
and if
all of those people I like,
those types of influencers join with Andrew, you're going to have a real problem on your hands.
That's a viable third party situation.
It's not about whether you can convince elected officials. It's about whether you can convince people who can actually move the needle. And those people can move the needle. And if they get involved, you've got a big credibility problem. Number two, you have to have a broad reach. If you think that a niche party is going to work, you have no shot.
That's what we say all the time. And it's no offense to the Greens, because
they're niche. Libertarians are niche. People's Party's niche.
It's niche.
You're niche.
You need to be a working people labor party.
100%.
That's how this is going to happen.
And even if that's not the full directive of where the forward party is going, it at least has the concept initially of the broad appeal. And that brings me to the final pillar, which of course is, how is it going to be funded? If it is willing to go the route, if Andrew is willing to go the route, it doesn't mean you can't take money, a lot of money. But if corporate special interest money is going to play a role, then it isn't going to work.
Because then those interests are counter to the labor people that would be needed for it to be a good third party effort.
If somebody like Dave Chappelle or Joe Rogan decides, I'll donate $100,000 to this venture, that's one thing.
Right.
If somebody from Raytheon says, I'm going to donate $100,000 to this venture, that's a no-go. So that's where you have to draw the line.
You have to look at whose interests are involved and what those interests are. If very, very wealthy people that support labor unions, workers' rights, and taking care of people with healthcare want to donate money to a party that's fighting for that, I'm good. I'll live with that. And in fact, for all the laws and the things on the books and the loopholes that allow very wealthy people to basically buy politicians, I actually don't mind as people doing it in the reverse direction in order to be competitive. But it has to be from people that are on the same issue with these policies. It cannot be from people that are going to want work counter to that. It cannot be from big corporate special interests. It just can't.
If I have observed, however casually it may be, but I have observed some of the language that people are using to describe Andrew and his venture. I'm not talking about, yes, you, Dave Weigel of the Washington Post.
I'm so thankful I'm not on social media, so I don't see this nonsense.
I'm talking about some of our old friends, people like that.
I don't think of those people as friends.
No, I'm using it sarcastically.
Okay, because I was thinking nobody at the Washington Post has ever been a friend of mine.
I'm not talking about them. I'm talking about the other left, some of the left.
Oh.
And so my point is, if you think that you're going to cast Andrew aside and say that his way is not going to work, how's your way working?
Actually, his way's working really well. He gets funded by Jeff Bezos and probably gets a really nice paycheck. His way's working great for him. And I don't even know who it is. And I can tell you that if he's at the Washington Post, it's the Jeff Bezos way, right?
But I'm not even talking about him. You're off in a whole other universe right now.
Post? Okay. Well,
I'm simply using Dave Weigel as an example because Dave Weigel is throwing shade at Andrew.
Who else was? Who else was it?
Other left media people.
Okay, because I don't really know of any decent left media people.
No, I'm simply saying that they are trying to paint this as, well, Andrew doesn't know what he's doing. Let me tell you something. Andrew's got 1,000,000 times more credibility than you do. I'm sorry that is what needs to be said, but it needs to be said. And so
okay, this is why I don't pay attention to this stuff.
Take Andrew seriously.
Because he's serious.
The Washington Post is not covering any of these other party ventures, but they're going to cover Andrew because they know he has an appeal. There is a likability to him that you can't put into words. It doesn't mean he doesn't make mistakes or that we vehemently disagree on certain issues, but he has a way of capturing an audience. He just does.
And here's the bottom line. He's not nefarious.
No.
He's not nefarious. He's a net positive.
And
he's not in this as some diabolical wanting to take over the world. He actually, regardless of whether or not we agree with him on things or he says things we agree, this is somebody who's really in this for the right reasons.
He's a family man. He absolutely
and
cares.
is not
he's
in
just
this
a regular guy.
Right. There's nothing nefarious there. And that is an important element to me in terms of somebody that I think just in terms of their general judgment and who I would count on.
And he's willing to take that chance. And a lot of people are not willing to take that chance, not to be the face. You know, there were a lot of people who wanted to help out with the Movement for the People's Party, and they had a huge summit when they launched. A lot of relevant people were there. Nina Turner, Dr. West, Marianne Williamson, Chris Hedges. I can keep going. But the point is, they were not the leaders of the venture. The leaders of the venture made a miscalculation in terms of who needed to drive it.
Well, originally I thought it was they wanted Bernie. They was like a draft. It started off as like a draft Bernie and have Bernie be the lead, which
if that happened,
that would have been, then that's a real deal.
Definitely.
But that's a deal breaker.
And
you need a leader.
And so at this point, Andrew is willing to put himself out there and take the slings and arrows that comes with being the face of a movement. That is not an easy thing to do, ladies and gentlemen, especially when you have kids, when you have a wife who already, you could see his wife, Evelyn, it really wear it on her.
Please don't ever say that about a woman. Nobody ever wants to hear that.
I am simply observing.
You're lovely, Evelyn. He doesn't know what he's talking about.
What I am saying is that you could see running for mayor how much that weighed on his family.
Sure.
That's what I'm saying.
Okay, because when you say that about women, it's sort of like
no, you mean like make them like
yes,
no,
it's like Nathan Lane birdcage when you say that. That's why I'm saying that. But anyway,
I'm saying you could see that you could see how much it affected them. It did.
But here's the thing I will also say about Andrew is, and I've spoken with him a couple of times. He is somebody that makes decisions based on science and reason. He is somebody that would surround himself with exceptionally smart people and does so and would listen to what they have to say. He does not think he's an expert on everything. He is just somebody that exhibits good judgment based in reason and wants to help.
And
really,
you know what?
You might not agree with what his methods are. That I get.
And unfortunately, the bad, when he ran for mayor in particular, outweighed the good in terms of the coverage. You see, you'll focus on the fact that he'll make his statement about Israel and let that dominate the news cycle, whereas he was the only person who ran for mayor in New York City who supported the New York Health Act. And to me, that's a lot more important.
For a mayor.
You just had the vote on the Iron Dome funding, 420 to 9.
And
this ain't a battle.
And a present.
Yeah.
Present.
And you ain't winning that fight right now. So focus on what you can win. That doesn't mean you don't keep fighting.
People are just so completely impractical. And this is the biggest problem on the left is it's so emotionally driven and not based on reason. It's like, and I say this to people all the time when you're talking about candidates, the bottom line is people just have to like you. You could be for all the wrong things, but if they like you, they'll support you and they don't even care what you stand for. That's the truth.
And this is the last thing I want to mention. You know, they get so caught up. And again, the Movement for the People's Party can say whatever they want. But the truth of the matter is they are simply more or less focusing on disaffected Democratic voters.
Way too small of a niche.
There are so many disaffected Republican voters.
Or how about that most people are not affiliated at all?
Or just independents.
That's most people.
So when you say not left, not right, but forward, again, people get too caught up in labels. The only thing that matters.
And people are attracted to this.
They are. The only thing that matters is corporate special interest money.
Yeah.
With all due respect, All of that niche stuff that you guys are focused on, and you could call me whatever the hell you want. I'm the all-American white male, and I have it easy. Blah, 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 blah. Say whatever the hell you want. At the end of the day, corporate special interest is all that matters. Without dealing with that,
Is somebody saying you're a privileged white man?
I'm just prepared for
Okay,
it.
you're prepared.
So that's all that matters, because that's what drives this world.
It's the truth.
And if you're not going to fight that fight, you're wasting your time. And I'm not going to waste my time anymore. Neither is Jen. Neither is anybody else that's in our orbit. You are going to fight where you can actually make an impact.
And really, it needs to be per issue. I really think that's the key thing.
Yes.
I really think we should start a thing like in travel and go to like labor rallies and
Yes.
different stuff. Like I want to go to Staten Island and go, you know, stand with the Amazon workers and Chris Smalls. And like, I would love to do that. And preferably not in the dead of winter.
Why don't you come up when I'm going up?
I don't know. We could talk about that.
Yeah.
But I'm just saying, like, I'd love to go. Like, I would love to
Even
make
if you had,
rounds.
like,
We
a
don't ever
sabbatical.
get to. I don't ever get to do that in Florida. There is no
No.
picket. There are no picket lines here. There is no striking.
No,
And so,
but you know what? We should
and
try
no
to do?
chance of getting of really developing that either.
No, but we should try to do something down here. I really think that we should try to. I mean, look. if
Look,
they
it's
can get
not.
the people
That's
out there.
not. It's sort of like it's our job to support, but it has to come from labor, which is why
Yeah.
we do fight for 15 rallies. I'll go anywhere to a fight for 15
Well, then I
rallies.
think we should talk to Linda.
Plus, I
Joseph
love.
about
I love.
possibly doing
I was going to say I love Linda Joseph.
So maybe we could set up some type of a labor rally centered around all these organizations, have a call to action.
About the PRO Act.
I really
and also the firefighter bills.
And-
like
and-
there's a few different labor
I gotta
things
tell
that
you,
we need to
even being at the the Protect Women's Rights rally, you have to have a call to action.
yeah.
You have to have.
Well, here's the thing: is that that's why this is what I said to you about why I wasn't that jazzed on going. It's not that I'm not supportive of women's reproductive rights. Like anybody who knows me knows that's just ridiculous. It's really about what that is. What those events are just big echo chambers of people that are already on your team, just standing around and patting each other on the back, which is really fun for creating like morale and spirit and all that. I get it. I'm not saying it has no purpose.
But what do you do after the event?
But when you don't have a call to action, it's kind of like
all that energy just dies.
yeah,
It's the
and
same
that's one of
thing-
our problems. So I'm fully supportive of
Yeah,
women's
but it's the
reproductive
same thing.
rights.
But it's the same thing with Bernie not basically employing all of his supporters for like tasks. There are millions of people who easily would have jumped on the idea of, well, we're going to do this and that, and blah, 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 blah. And so, but that would have made a difference. You're just kind of letting them hang in the wind. That doesn't work.
Not all groups went that way, but unfortunately for us in South Florida, the progressive groups were Bernie groups that are now wandering in the desert.
People need to learn from what's going on in Capitol Hill right now, particularly as we had with Representative Rokana, who was on the other day, with anybody who is on the non-corporate left. You are seeing what happens when they actually are willing to fight. And what ultimately is happening now is they are seeing what can benefit from that and actually exerting power and gaining more power, because that's what's happening. And I want to say this, I don't know where you stand or not. And look, I have a lot of problems with the president, but at the end of the day, I still maintain that I've been informed to say it properly. President Biden clearly has a very good relationship with Senator Sanders.
Who told you to say that correctly?
I'll tell you afterwards.
Oh, for God's sake. You mean you're not allowed to refer to him as Joe?
It's not that. It's just he is the president. And at the end of the day, the president and the senator clearly have an understanding amongst each other and that they are fighting together on this issue. And it could be generational, no pun intended, changing. It really could. This is something that we really haven't seen before. You know, Obama didn't exactly have some type of a progressive senator like a Bernie with the name recognition and the influence at the time that could have helped include the public option in Obamacare.
We really need them to stand firm.
I think they will.
I hope so. And everybody out there in Arizona, she doesn't get a moment's peace. She shouldn't have a moment's peace.
Brianna Westbrook kicking butt and taking names out there. So are a lot of other people. And of course, the lovely lady that we would really like to see run is Eva Pastova. We'll see what happens with that. But in the meantime,
She'd be really good. I'm telling you, she'd be great.
she'd be
for
the best
Senate out there.
foil. She'd be the best foil for somebody
She'd
like
be
Senator.
so good. And honestly, with how big her district is, she basically has run a statewide race.
Considering how much
That's
distance
the
she's
thing.
covered
Well,
already.
that's the thing about her district in Arizona. It's so massive.
Yeah. Well, got to
but-
start sometime.
yeah.
That's the problem with the U.S. Senate. People forget, and it's 6 years is a long time.
Oh, so you know what? Did I tell you I have this new sort of, I was thinking about this abortion thing, about the people that cannot get past that it's a living entity, that you're ending a life, that they just cannot get past it, and it's a living thing. But here's what I thought of. So is virus, bacteria, and fungus. And yet you're not forcing people to carry those to term and just live with the bacteria and the virus.
That's
Why-
because you need to have the separation of church and state.
No, I know, but it's funny. I was just driving down the street thinking about this the other day, and I'm like, okay, because here's the thing. I'm willing to concede that when you have an abortion, you're killing a living thing. I'm willing to concede that that's a killing, that that's murder. I'm willing to concede that. And I thought of that. I'm like, okay, so that's true. But the only thing that really would trump that would be the bodily autonomy of the person within whom that entity is residing. See, that actually trumps it. But I really thought, I'm like, how come they don't take the same approach to viruses, bacteria, and
Most
fungus?
people, unfortunately, are hypocritical.
If I get a fungus, I'm killing that thing. I'm telling you, I'm killing that thing. And the same thing for any, like, look, you're all out there getting the COVID vaccine to kill the virus. We're trying to kill the virus. Living entities, people, you're committing murder. You're murdering the coronavirus.
You can't beat Mother Nature. That's what I say.
I'm just saying, that's my new way to tackle the choice issue.
This has been fun. I hope you guys enjoyed it. We'll see you Monday.